This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason: to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raz Shafer.
Hey guys, this is Raz Shafer, and man, I'm sorry for the break. It's been a little bit, a week or two since my last episode. I've been absolutely snowed with my paying work, and so being on the road, several thousand miles covered here in the last few weeks, and lots of good things happening for the conservative movement here in Texas. I am stoked to be back here with you guys today. Some of you guys have already started listening to the My Campaign Coach Minute podcast series that I launched about a month ago here on iTunes, and hopefully you've been enjoying that. Basically, the format is that we're doing about 1 to 2 minute episodes every single day, or at least when I'm in town and able to get them recorded. And we're taking just different campaign tips, kind of one-liners, and just a couple sentences that are very powerful and I think very insightful. And we're kind of breaking those down a little bit. So basically, it's kind of like an audio blog every day talking about an important campaign tip that can help you or your campaign, in a lot of cases, just in life in general. And we're throwing those out there on a regular basis, very short, very digestible. They're available on iTunes and Amazon Alexa, so you can have as part of your flash briefing on there. And I've been enjoying doing them. It's helped me, kind of push me to create a lot more content, also taking a lot more time, but it seemed to be a pretty fun format and means there's lots of blog content on the website because we have a blog accompanying each of those and the audio. And so on a multimedia front, we have lots of stuff coming out. One thing I did want to throw out to you guys is I would love to get some additional feedback. As I'm struggling to keep things going and to make sure that we're publishing content every week and keeping up with the How to Run for Office podcast, one of the questions that I've got is, what are you guys getting the most from? So I've kind of slacked off on the emails, trying to get caught up with those email blasts out to our folks, our subscribers every week. And the How to Run for Office podcast, the blog, videos. We got a lot of different options as I'm deciding where to put my time. And the biggest thing that I can think of that would be helpful to me is for you guys to tell me, what do you enjoy the most? What do you get the most out of? Because at the end of the day, the whole reason I'm doing this and doing it for free at that is that I want to help conservatives win their campaigns and be active. I want to see more principled Americans getting involved in running for office and helping people do that. So if I'm not doing what you guys feel is most effective, or if you got any ideas, I'd love to hear them. My email is Raz, that's R-A-Z, at mycampaigncoach.com, and I'd love to hear from you. Now, as far as this week goes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a compilation of a number of the My Campaign Coach Minute tips that I've done in the last month, just to kind of give you guys a feel for what they are, and I think it'll be a good introduction to that podcast. Now we've got some of that good content out there, and I think it'll be very helpful as you're kind of just clicking through those and listening in, and it's quick and digestible, and hopefully you'll enjoy it and get some good ideas for your campaigns. And for our Texas friends here that are in runoffs, maybe it'll help you out. So I'm going to go ahead and knit these together for y'all. I hope you enjoy it. These are episodes from the My Campaign Coach Minute, and I hope you enjoy it. Rejection on the campaign trail is a fact of life. Dust yourself off and get back on the horse. Anybody who has ever tried to sell something or ask somebody out on a date can tell you that rejection sucks. The vulnerability combined with conviction, followed by soul-crushing defeat, is a cocktail that's hard to swallow. Nothing about it is fun. How about signing up for a non-paying job that involves the specter of that rejection behind every door, phone call, and public event? That sounds fun, right? Well, it's a fact of life. When you're running for office, you do so knowing that there are likely a whole lot of people out there who aren't going to like your message. Now, we hope that number is south of 50%, but we won't know for sure until Election Day. You're doing this because you believe something. You know the best path forward and are confident that you were the vehicle for forwarding that agenda. This isn't necessarily hubris, though. A healthy dose of conviction and ego are essential to running for office. In particular, conviction is an important insulator to the rejection you face on the campaign trail. Now, I talk a lot about the 3 whys. Why me, why now, and why this office? In the face of rejection, you need to mentally recite your personal why. The summation of all those that get you out of the bed in the morning. The difference you're fighting to make is important, and getting doors slammed in your face and curses hurled at you is a price of admittance. Remember the good side. You have people who are sacrificing to support you and believe in what you're fighting for. As bad as the other side wants to beat you, they want you to win even more. Remember your why and what others are doing to support you. Your mind can't hold on to despair and gratitude at the same time, so make sure the latter voice is louder. You can't win a campaign by working banker's hours. Taking on a campaign, depending on the scope, is basically like signing up for another part or full-time job. Just like taking on a new job, there's a lot to learn and an adjustment period where you have to relearn the art of balancing your schedule and figure out how to juggle your competing responsibilities. The more forethought you put into this process before your campaign launches, the better off you're going to be. I recommend that you start out with an audit of your current schedule and obligations. You've got the same 24 hours when the campaign is at full speed as you do before it starts. That means you've got to reallocate your time. By knowing how you're using it now, you'll have a great starting point for beginning the transition. After you've taken inventory of how you currently spend your week, decide where you can cut and how to reorganize your week. Have candid conversations with your spouse, boss, and other important people in your life during this process. Their feedback will help you make sure you don't sacrifice the important things while simultaneously creating buy-in for them within the campaign. Now, make no mistake, campaigns are tough and you're going to have to be working a lot. Responsibilities to work and your family, as well as the necessities of eating, sleeping, and all those others don't just evaporate. If you're running for office, I doubt you're the banker's hours type anyhow. You're somebody who is driven and wants to make a difference. Take one day at a time and remind yourself each day why you're doing this. That's a winning recipe for hanging tough on the campaign trail. Never pass up an opportunity to say thank you. There are no two words in the English language more powerful than thank you. But I'll tell you what, I'd be hard-pressed to find a campaign that used them nearly enough. As a candidate, you're the front man, but the campaign will fail unless you're surrounded by people who are dedicated to your success. Activists, donors, volunteers, friends, family, and more. All are pulling for you and investing in your effort. But there's more to thanking somebody than just saying the words, right? We all know the difference between the over-the-shoulder, thanks, man, and when somebody pauses, looks into your eyes, and gives a heartfelt thank you. I want you to build a culture of gratitude within your organization, and it starts with you. Make time every week to write thank you cards. Get to know your people and find out how they best receive thanks. For some, it's gifts, others, public recognition. I know that for me, there's nothing better than someone to pull me aside privately, look into my eyes, express how I've helped them, and say thank you. As a candidate, you're in the motivation business, and there's no better way to keep people motivated than to make them feel your appreciation for their dedication. A good message without proper repetition is wasted air. A good message without proper repetition is wasted air. And here's a third time. A good message without proper repetition is wasted air. Got the message? Okay, so that was a bit literal, but I think you're hearing what I'm saying. There are two parts to today's tip. The first is, throughout a campaign, you're going to be touching a lot of voters and try and get your message, record, and platform in front of them. But once isn't enough, right? We're knocking on doors, making phone calls, sending mail, hitting social media, and more. One hit isn't enough. Now, experts differ on how many touches are necessary to make a sale, in this case, getting a vote. There's no magic number, but most will tell you that it's between 3 and 7. The higher the quality of contact, the lower the number needed. Your campaign knows how many votes it needs to win and roughly how much you think you can raise in funding. From there, start building out a plan to repeatedly touch voters. Canvassing and phone contact are the most personal, while TV is among the least impactful. Your goal should be to maximize the number of high-quality touches per voter within your target group. The second part of the tip is about driving home a particular message. If you have a good line or message that's resonating, don't just say it once and assume that it's going to get out there. There's a reason that most candidate stump speeches are virtually the same from one whistle stop to the next. I know that when I was working for Ted Cruz, I could have basically recited the stump speech verbatim after just a few stops. Spice up your speech with comments tailor-made for your specific audience, but make sure you keep driving home the key message components that you know you need to communicate. Repetition is the key. Never lie or embellish your campaign bio, because you will get caught. This seems on the surface like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised to find out how many candidates get slammed for failing to follow this rule. Look, we all want folks to like us, and if you're running for office, you're probably pretty proud of the accomplishments you've made in life. What's the big deal in rounding up your college grade point average or padding the number of lawsuits you won? Would it hurt to make your position in the military seem more dangerous or cooler than it really was? How about how many years you've lived in the district or how many years you've been voting in your party's primary elections? I've seen people, in some cases good people, fudge the numbers on all of these, and it's always a mistake. John Ossoff, the Democrat running for the special election congressional seat in Georgia last year, got slammed for this in a very, very public way. In John's case, the way he phrased his bio appeared to deliberately mislead voters about his national security credentials. Since that was a central pillar of the campaign, when this was called out as a lie, it deeply damaged his candidacy. Once you make a statement, it can be challenged, and folks can be forgiving if you misstate something accidentally. And that's not the case when it comes to your bio, your experience, or your record. These are all bits of knowledge you should have down pat. Never let your ego or a campaign aide talk you into embellishing your background. You absolutely will get caught. Communication isn't what I say, it's what you hear. My dad started telling me this when my age was still in the single digits, and reminds me of it frequently still. And it's as true as it was when I first heard it. The gist of this lesson is that I take ownership over what happens when I open my mouth. The words I choose, the inflection I generate, and the gesticulations my body mimes are all talking at once. Whether it's as a husband, boss, or candidate, it's important that you always keep communication as the key goal when you open your mouth. The focus isn't on you and whether you think you're sounding good. It's about whether your audience is correctly receiving the message you intend for them. The better you know your audience, the better you're able to pre-plan and adjust your communication. As a husband, I take ownership for my communication with my bride. If she doesn't understand what I'm trying to say, I don't allow myself to get frustrated. Instead, I ask myself what it is that I really want to get across and figure out how I can reach her in a more effective way. With voters, this process can yield even more frustration than with a spouse. We work hard to hone a message and practice our delivery, and then once we give it to them, if they don't respond in the way we're hoping for, our minds default to the thought of, what the heck's wrong with them? That's the absolute wrong way to go. We've got to take ownership of our communication, and that means that if they, whoever it is, doesn't hear us, it's our fault, not theirs. Communication isn't what I say, it's what you hear. Unless you're Donald Trump, candidates shouldn't wear hats. If you want the perfect visual example of why hats are not a good idea for candidates, just Google Dukakis in the tank. I've also linked to an article about this seminal event on our blog. As you read about the issues with candidates and hats, whether it's Calvin Coolidge in an Indian headdress, Mike Dukakis in his tank helmet, or John Kerry running around the space shuttle in a bunny suit, there are two main lessons to take away from this. The first one is simple. Hats often look goofy and detract from the image we have in our collective mind of what a public official should look like. The second lesson is really the larger one. In nearly all of these situations, the candidate in question tried to adopt a public image that was a significant departure from their brand. In Dukakis' case, he decided to abandon his family's all-American immigrant story that had catapulted him to the Democratic nomination and adopt a strongly pro-national defense message. The picture of him wearing the tank helmet looked uncannily like a Mr. Rogers in battle gear and was used by the Bush campaign to highlight this dissonance between his record and the image he was trying to build. As a candidate, you should build on the brand you cultivated before launching your campaign and use it as a starting point for the rhetoric and visuals of the race. It's easy to challenge candidates as having adopted a new persona on the campaign trail because it's so often true, and visuals tell that story better than rhetoric. President Trump gets away with wearing hats because wearing his famous MAGA hat is consistent with his pre-campaign behavior. His now ubiquitous trucker-style golf hat has been in any number of pictures before his candidacy, so Americans were used to seeing him in a hat. It was part of his image. Adding his campaign slogan to the front was a genius move and lands him as our one lone exception to this no hats rule. Never use an endorsement that isn't in writing. Endorsements are awesome, and as a candidate, you'll want to accrue as many good ones as you can, but always get them in writing. First of all, getting endorsement in writing means that you have total proof of what the endorser wanted to say, and there's zero ambiguity related to their intention. A candidate I was working against a few years back published several endorsements from elected officials who hadn't actually endorsed her candidacy. All the comments she published were made before her candidacy was known, even to them. They were saying nice things about her at political fundraisers, saying things only intended for the ears of the attendees, not a public endorsement of her election. Her attempts to use those words in a way they were never intended severely undermined her relationship with those individuals, and the fact she misled voters about the intent behind the words became a campaign issue. You never want to be caught in a position where people can question the veracity of what you say or whether you're misleading people with how you present the information. Both of these problems can be overcome by getting an endorsement in writing. That can be as simple as somebody signing their name on an endorsement form or emailing you the text of their endorsement. Keep it on file, honor the commitment of their support, and be ready to produce proof if someone ever questions how you've used it. Don't run for a job you can't excel at. This one seems so simple that some of you are probably saying, how stupid do you think we are, Raz? The fact is that far too often, fitness for the actual job of being an elected official is near the bottom of the list of reasons that motivate a candidate to run for a job. Everything from simply thinking that it's an easy race to win or that it'd have really cool job perks to general love of service are all reasons I've seen motivate a candidate to run much more powerfully than that they truly believe they'd be the best person to execute the job they seek. There are lots of starting points in politics. Some folks' first campaign is for high office, while others climb the ladder. Both approaches have unique pros and cons, but in neither case should you seek a job that you can't be a rock star at. If you're considering a run for public office, don't let the cart get ahead of the horse. Start your deliberation with that question. Can I crush this job? Am I the best person available? If so, then start designing your campaign strategy to win. If you run for an office that you're not qualified for or can't excel at, one of two things will happen. You'll lose because it becomes clear you're running primarily to benefit yourself, or you'll win and quickly find yourself trapped in a job you're not equipped for. Neither case provides an opportunity for effective public service or a long-term chance to grow your political impact. You should never be too busy to listen. Some of the most destructive campaign mistakes I've ever seen originate with a candidate who neglects to follow this tip. All right, so you're in the middle of a campaign, you're juggling family and job and volunteers and donors, and somewhere in the middle, your ears just start shutting down. It can seem like they're acting out of their own accord on their own. It's easy to understand how this happens, right? It's simply human. The best way to keep from falling prey to this mid-campaign deafness is to prepare for the threat early in the campaign planning process. Important information always needs to get to you, but one of the problems is you can't always predict how it's going to come to you. First of all, pick the right people to be inside the bubble. These are your senior campaign team, kitchen cabinets, and close friends. These are the people to whom you can make the commitment, if you need to tell me something, I will listen. Accompanying that should be for you to communicate that you need them to act as filters as well, to keep things off your plate unless you need to be actually involved. Number 2, create effective information funnels. Information is going to be pouring into your campaign from all directions: Twitter, Facebook, polling, opposition research, volunteers, etc. By hiring the right team and effectively delegating to them, you'll be able to keep things off your desk that you don't need to see. I'm not talking about some house of cards deniability. I mean that they can gather and synthesize information so that if you do need to see something, it's in a format that's most helpful to you. Further, if a decision needs to be made which doesn't require your involvement, they can take action and keep from contributing to your decision fatigue. Number 3, designate times and ways for your team to bring you the smaller things. Open door policies seem great, but in reality they create distractions and multiply decision fatigue on the part of leaders. If there's something big, then your senior team should be able to reach you. However, the smaller but potentially important stuff should be presented in a specific time and manner. Work with your team to help figure out how they'll decide what types of things fall into each category and empower them to make that call. They'll make mistakes, but if you train them correctly, your operation is going to run like a well-oiled machine. The biggest obstacle to effective listening is too much noise. Plan ahead to minimize that noise and make listening a personal and institutional priority. Anybody familiar with politics or political campaigns has heard about opposition research. That's where you find out everything possible about your opponent, both to know where they are strong and weak. The flip side of the coin is far less well known, and tragically so. What I'm talking about here is the vulnerability study or self-opposition research. If you saw yourself as an easy target for attack or someone who has done things he or she can't answer for, you're probably not the type to be running for office. And in that false security lies the fatal deceit that has ended so many campaigns. I don't care if you're Mother Teresa or Mr. Rogers. When you run for political office, you will be attacked. The more you know in advance about the vector and particulars of those attacks, the better able you are to prevent and prepare for them. This shouldn't be quarterbacked by the candidate or those closest to them. When I'm conducting a vulnerability study, I want the operator to dig as deep as they can and try to figure out every possible sinister way that my opponents could attack me. Then we can determine the best ways to armor ourselves, prepare for counterattack, or conduct a controlled detonation by getting out in front of an issue. Allowing a candidate to guide the vulnerability study virtually always leads to negatives being underplayed. It's a human reaction, but the results have killed more campaigns than I can count. Learn more about what opposition research and vulnerability studies are like and how to do them correctly by listening to our interviews with John Lapp and Willis Jones. No candidate is an objective participant in their own campaign. Some of the worst candidates I've ever seen have a lot of experience running campaigns. That seems counterintuitive, right? The problem usually doesn't arise from them having bad ideas about what it takes to win a campaign, but rather from refusing to delegate tasks and take good advice. When you become a candidate, you lose all objectivity about your election contest. I've seen people who have run successful campaigns make awful rookie mistakes, and experienced business leaders lose all ability to delegate tasks. Pre-campaign experience is critical to winning, but you shouldn't pretend like it's going to be the same. Your brain is going to simply behave differently when you take on this new role. Whatever your experience and background are, you need to select a core group who will help widen your aperture. They are the eyes watching your blind spots. Ask them regularly to tell you what they think you're missing, or the things that you see but where your perception is off. Secondly, you need to find people to whom you can delegate and trust their work. This takes time, but if you begin training yourself and your team to delegate effectively from the outset of a campaign, your life is going to be much easier. No candidate, including yourself, is an objective participant in their own campaign. By acknowledging this reality and taking these steps, you're putting your campaign on solid ground. Never say or write anything you don't want on Buzzfeed. It's incredible how social media and the internet have changed campaigns. While there are plenty of negatives associated with these evolutions, one of the things I like is that it makes it much easier to catch candidates in lies. Inconsistencies get caught much easier than ever before due to the amount of information that people are putting out in the public domain. Even outside of campaigns, we see corporate HR departments reviewing applicants' social media presence for liabilities. And a quick Google search will reveal plenty of examples of candidates, their families, or staff saying things on social media, even private texts or messages, that hurt the campaign when they get out. This isn't just an issue for what you say during the campaign. For instance, I've been on Facebook since 2004 and Twitter since 2009. During that time, I've posted tens of thousands of status updates. Now, I think I've done a reasonably good job to stay aware that those are going to always be out there and be careful about what I say, but I have no doubt that many of them would be used to attack me if I ever ran for office. The written or recorded communication that we engage in, whether public or private, are part of our permanent record, and there's no telling when something may circle back around to us. During a few recent elections, written statements or even handwritten letters from decades ago have become part of the ammunition to undermine campaigns. So social media is just part of the story. My point isn't to have you always looking over your shoulder or sending every tweet to a PR consultant before hitting publish. Just ask yourself whether it's something you'd be okay with showing up on Buzzfeed. Ask, would my mom be ashamed if she found out I wrote this? I think the mom test is a pretty good one for life generally. Recognize that your communication matters and is out there potentially forever. Realize that you're operating on a different kind of stage than most people, and just be smart about what you say. Here's today's tip in a quote form from Charles Louis de Secondat. He said, "What orators lack in depth, they make up for in length." It's hard to be concise with our words. It takes work. If you give me an hour to talk about a topic, I'll have no problem filling the time, and I probably won't need to spend more than 1 to 2 times the allotted window to prepare. However, if you give me 5 minutes, I'm going to spend between 10 and 20 times my speaking time in order to prepare my remarks. With today's shrinking attention spans, whether in person or on video, it's important that we work hard on communicating within tight time constraints. We need to be concise, and it takes significant effort to achieve that. The first place you start with this is by answering the 3 why questions which your campaign revolves around. Why me? Why now? And why this office? For each of those, get all your thoughts on paper, scratch them out, and just word vomit onto the page. Once that step is complete, begin organizing your thoughts. Pick the points you believe are most persuasive and hone their presentation. In the end, you're going to want a few different versions of that information: a 30-second elevator pitch, a 5-minute appeal, and a 10-minute stump speech. Each length should have specific utility and be focused on the type of audience that you're appealing to. You'll then customize these stock speeches as necessary for the individual event. Don't assume that speaking a long time will make you sound smart. Short, tight remarks can often be the best way to impact your audience. By preparing them well before a speech, you'll communicate much more effectively and really stand out among your competitors. You need to work harder and smarter than your opponent if you want to win. A good plan is awesome, and burning a combination of sweat and shoe leather is important, but there's a limit to how far you can get if you can't combine the two. When I talk about working hard and smart, I mean that planning and execution are important. A good plan that's not executed is wasted time. So is activity that's not well thought out. If you want to win, you need to constantly balance planning activity. You should start that planning at the polls closing on election day and work backwards through time. Give it as much detail as possible, and then start trying to identify the inputs you need in order to keep that machine fueled. Those will primarily be in terms of volunteer hours, dollars, endorsements, and your focused time as a candidate. Planning is how you make sure that your activity is purposeful and will move the needle in your favor. Then give it everything you've got, from knocking doors to meeting with donors and attending events. You need to make sure that your activity level is consistently high. You're the one who is setting the pace for the rest of the team, so show them how hard you want them to work through your own individual work ethic. Nobody is going to work harder on your race than you are willing to. Working smart or hard won't get you very far. If you work smart and hard, your planning and execution will form the basis for a very strong campaign. Don't just ask winning candidates for advice. Losing teaches lessons winners may never see. I've interviewed and talked to more candidates than I can count. Each of them has unique lessons that they've learned, but some of the most valuable advice I've received has come from men and women who lost their races. The biggest reason behind this is that most winners don't spend time reflecting on what they did wrong. They won, so how bad could it have been? When you lose, you spend a lot of time thinking about what you could have done differently and why you came up short. Even if it's not a full-blown after-action review, which I always recommend, this time spent mulling over the defeat often leads to some rather poignant lessons. When you're seeking out advice, don't just listen to the winners. If they haven't done a strong campaign post-mortem, they may not even really know why they won or the things that nearly cost them their victory. Go back and listen to our interviews with guys like Matt Krause. He lost his first race and learned a ton. On the second go-round, he won a tough race and has won every race since. The second lesson is that whether you win or lose, you need to perform a good after-action review. This should be a no-holds-barred series of meetings with your core team and some outside observers. You need to know what went well, where you were weak, and how to make a plan to do it better next time. Every facet of your campaign should be infused with a sense of urgency. No lollygagging. A lot of people equate urgency purely with speed. Speed is obviously important in campaigns, but just looking at urgency as a measure of tempo comes up short of what I'm talking about here. I mean that you must be purposeful. If you're needing to knock doors or put up yard signs, speed and urgency may be synonymous. However, there are plenty of campaign activities that may require urgency at a slower pace, more deliberate and thoughtful. You're still being purposeful, but the manifestation of urgency looks different to the outside observer. Think about special operations forces and how they work. They are so incredibly swift, but they will be the first to tell you that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. They understand that you need to be urgent in every action, but that speed is only one component of being effective. As it turns out, the easiest way to increase speed is to get good at something while practicing it at a slower rate. The great thing about this is that in the beginning months of a campaign are the perfect training for the frenetic pace of the last few weeks. If you use that slower time to polish your machine and hone your abilities, you'll be just fine when the heat cranks up as you near the finish line. Be urgent, purposeful in everything you do, and setting a great example for your team. There is no greater enemy to your campaign than your own ego. If you're running for office, you've probably got a pretty healthy ego. Otherwise, you wouldn't be telling everybody out there that you're the best possible option for a given job. While ego rightfully carries a negative connotation, it's an important part of each of us, and when kept in check, can be a very positive force. But good Lord, I've seen it wreck campaigns. You probably thought of several examples since I started talking from times you've seen a person's ego lead to failure. Jobs, marriages, children, friendships. Every facet of our lives can be compromised if our ego gets out of control. When you run for office, so many of your normal ego checks are no longer in place. At least they're often less effective. Your best friend may have always been able to pull you back when you were getting too full of yourself, but now that you're a candidate, it's easier for the devil on your shoulder to tell you, hey, you know what? He just doesn't understand campaigns. Or he's just getting jealous of all the attention I'm getting and the cool title I'm fixing to have. I totally understand if you're listening and saying, no, Raz, that's not going to happen to me. But even that reaction is an example of your ego getting in the way of your learning. The only way to keep yourself in check is through practice humility and a strong system of accountability. You need to make humility part of your daily life and ensure that you're surrounded by people who can call you out and get your attention. People who can help pop that bubble. This lesson is closely tied to the one we discussed in episode 9, Never Be Too Busy to Listen. You may win a campaign in spite of losing control over your ego, but you'll just be getting further down a very dark path. At all costs, control your ego. Uncontrolled, it's absolutely your worst enemy. Handwritten notes are one of the most powerful tools you have, and they're very cheap. Growing up, I felt like pulling teeth when my mom made me write thank you cards. For some reason, I absolutely hated it. I was grateful for the gifts, but something about it, laziness probably, just made it a process I really disliked. Far too many times, I didn't properly express my gratitude for the gifts I was given. In the last few years, especially as social media became a bigger part of my life, I actually started getting to like writing cards a lot more. Part of it was that with so few people sending written communication these days, it was a way for my words to stand out in a new way. I still don't write as many notes as I should, but I started making it a regular part of my week. I'm very blessed, so I have very many people who I'm grateful for and very thankful for the things they do for me. So each week, whether it's a big reason or not, I write at least a few handwritten notes. The results have been pretty cool in my opinion. Your campaign, and every other one, will likely be sending lots of stuff through the mail. Postcards, letters, fundraising, and none of those things build a relationship. They're impersonal even if effective at their given purpose. I recommend you budget at least 1 hour per week to write handwritten notes to people. You're scheduling time for calls, fundraising, meetings, canvassing, etc. Add writing to your list. It's important. Even in cases where it's a fairly formulaic thank you card, handwrite as many as possible and note something personal that will build a deeper connection. Let the recipient know that you remember them and care about their support and friendship. Much like your door knocking, handwritten notes are something that too few candidates do. That will make yours stand out all the more. If you can't tell someone why you're running in 30 seconds or less, don't run. One of the first things we talk about in our free online course is how to answer 3 questions. Why me? Why I'm the right person for the job? Why now? Why this is the right time for me to run? And why this office? Why this is the job for me? Anytime somebody asks you a question on the campaign trail, it always comes back to those fundamental questions. You'll start out with pages of notes. Take some time by yourself and just get everything you can out of your head and on paper. After some copy editing, these pages will be the genesis of your campaign's messaging. Once it's boiled down to its essence, those 3 questions form the answer when somebody asks, why are you running? A succinct, confident answer to this question is one of the hardest things you'll ever create on the campaign. Spend quality time on it and get feedback from your team. I think about it in terms of if I was pitching somebody for $1 million and only had 30 seconds to make or break the opportunity, how much time would I spend to put into preparation for those 30 seconds? Well, in this case, you're going to be talking about a 30-second answer that you'll use repeatedly, and it's going to determine whether you're elected. Prepare well and don't run if you can't make a strong case for why you're running in 30 seconds or less. Never break the law. You're not Frank Underwood, and you will get caught. I pretty well hope that y'all are virtuous, law-abiding citizens, but it would be silly to pretend that temptation isn't real. On the campaign trail, there are a lot of laws you need to pay attention to. They impact everything from how you raise money to election day sign logistics. I hope I don't need to worry about y'all breaking the kind of laws that Frank Underwood conveniently forgets about on House of Cards, but the smaller ones don't always seem important. The fact of the matter is that whether you're a hotshot like Frank Underwood or not, skirting or breaking the law has significant negative repercussions. Trying to persuade voters to support you just a little bit inside the legal demarcation line when you think no one is looking or slipping a piece of literature into their mailbox may seem like small things, but when they become news, they'll paint your campaign in a broadly negative light. Make sure you find out the rules governing your campaign early on, ideally before you start running. From there, follow them religiously and work your butt off within the rules. Keep your eyes out for opponents breaking the laws, but don't waste efforts doing that when you should be working. It's hard to imagine that just a few years ago, you had to make hard copies of campaign documents in order to share them. Printing, collating, and mailing important documents took all too significant time. But now that's not the case. Cloud storage and collaboration and editing are the way to do it. Security and accessibility are the 2 factors in deciding where you'll store your campaign files. For me, I recommend Google Drive for all your campaign needs. Now, I don't get a penny for recommending them, but I've been using them for years. Every campaign I've worked with, client I've served, and project I've directed has all been run through Google Drive. There's nothing out there that'll give you the ease of access, tight security, and collaborative capabilities like Google Drive will. Consider security and accessibility when deciding all kinds of campaign tech. From password sharing with tools like LastPass to basic graphic editing like Canva. All these tools provide fantastic software as a service that are airtight with security and broadly accessible to your team. Free interns are awesome. Get all you can, train them well, and keep them very busy. As a former free intern, I absolutely endorse this message. The fact is that everybody wants free labor. but it's the training and deployment where most people fail. The biggest surprise that I found when I started hiring interns was how much work it took to find things for them to do. Let's face it, when you get an intern, even if you've seen their resume, you have no idea what they're competent with. Can they take pictures, file documents, respond to emails, or is refilling the toilet paper the only thing you can trust them to do right? I recommend that at the start, or even before the beginning of a campaign, you should spend significant time identifying the tasks you can easily delegate. At least scratch out a rough training framework and decide who will monitor them as well as how. With this done, you'll be able to train and deploy them much more quickly once you're able to acquire them. From there, just make sure you're communicating with them and providing them steady direction. These folks are working for free because they want to gain experience and help you win. They're on your team. Make sure it's worth their time and give them real opportunities to make an impact. Projecting enthusiasm is absolutely critical. I don't care how tired, stressed, or far down the polls you are, at least smile. If you're running for office or directing a campaign, optimism should simply ooze out of you. It doesn't matter whether you're down in the polls by 15 or 20 points. If you're still in the race, project enthusiasm. If you can't do that, drop out of the race and make your defeat official. The fact is that plenty of races swing wildly in the last couple weeks. Even more suffer from a poor read on the political environment. That means that most of you will have no real idea of where exactly you stand until Election Day and the votes are counted. So what good does it do to be down on yourself? My point isn't that you should lie to yourself or your supporters. What I'm saying is that if you're in the race, be in it. Don't run unless you believe winning is possible, and once you're in the race, fight through the finish line. At every point, look to your supporters and find ways to motivate them. You're running for a cause. Make it infectious. Rejection on the campaign trail is an absolute fact of life. Dust yourself off and get back on the horse. I don't remember the first time I got cussed out while canvassing. I know it's happened a lot, but after careful examination by my bride, I can confirm that I don't have a single scar as a result. No blood has been lost, and rigorous counseling has been unable to uncover the slightest psychological ramifications from political rejection. The truth is that being rejected on the campaign trail sucks. Whether it's someone wordlessly shutting the door in your face or your conservative friend telling you that they won't donate to your campaign, none of that feels good. Those are small defeats, though, and you know they're going to happen. Repetition is the key, and letting yourself be put off by temporary defeat will lead to permanent failure. To win a campaign, you need to be tenacious. No matter what failures you face, keep plowing ahead. Dedicate yourself to keeping on through Election Day, and keep getting back on the horse. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was the first 25 episodes mashed together from the My Campaign Coach Minute series. That's its own standalone podcast. And we're not going to be doing this on a repeat basis, but I felt like it was something you guys needed to be introduced to, and I hope you'll enjoy that. It's a good way for me to advertise the other content we're doing out there. So go and subscribe to that. It's the My Campaign Coach Minute on Alexa or on iTunes. You can find it either place, subscribe to it, give us a rating. All those things are a big help to us. In the meantime, I'm working on getting some more interviews recorded and some more monologues locked down to be putting some more content out y'all's way very, very soon. So I appreciate y'all's patience. Please do give me any feedback you've got. I want to make sure that I'm providing content every week that helps you win elections. That's the most important to me, not the specific format or style. I just want to make sure that I'm doing what's going to help y'all the most. And your feedback is what's most important to helping me do that. Y'all have a great week, and I'll be back soon.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from My Campaign Coach.